It's 8 o'clock. This is the UK Tonight. Coming up, the government sets itself on a collision course with the former Chelsea owner, Roman Abramovich. The oligarch was forced to sell the club when Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022. The profits from that sale, some £2.5 billion, were supposed to be used to help victims of the war, but no funds were ever released. Also tonight, defiant resident doctors begin their 5-day strike across England. It is the 14th walkout of this dispute. The Prime Minister says the strike is dangerous and utterly irresponsible. The union behind it says it wants a genuinely long-term plan on jobs and pay. Plus, we discuss the future of the Rolling Stones amid reports the band have scrapped plans for a UK and European tour because Keith Richards could not commit to the gruelling schedule. And Snicko shocker, an apology from the operator of Key Ashes technology after a controversial human error on day one of the third test. All that's come, and much more on the UK Tonight. Good evening. Now, the Prime Minister warned today Roman Abramovich will be facing legal action unless he hands over £2.5 billion to Ukraine. Sir Keir Starmer telling the former Chelsea owner that the clock is ticking for him to donate the proceeds from the sale of the football club to a new foundation for humanitarian causes in Ukraine. Well, you'll remember Mr. Abramovich sold the club back in 2022 after he was sanctioned following Russia's invasion earlier that year. The oligarch then agreeing to donate the proceeds to the people of Ukraine, but has so far failed to do so. Well, let's get more now from our sports correspondent, Rob Harris. Rob, the government's saying we're talking about £2.5 billion here, which is a huge sum of money. The club has been sold for some time now, nearly 4 years, and Sir Keir Starmer's brought it up today. What's behind it all? What stage are we at in this? Because, as I said, it's been going on for some time.
And they're raising the pressure on the legal action because it was in the summer that the government talked about we will take Roman Abramovich to court to force him to hand over this cash. Seemingly no development since then. We've been asking then so unexpectedly at Prime Minister's questions today, Sir Keir Starmer raises the issue. And out of the blue, seemingly, the government line up a press release saying that it's his final chance. He has to now pay up all he risks legal action.
Could be done in a matter of months in terms of moving to the next step.
Yeah, and they threatened legal action earlier. It's all about trying to force him to agree to the funds from the Chelsea sale to be unfrozen and released. Because, remember, the club was forced to be sold after Abramovich was sanctioned after the all-out war launched in February 2022.
It moved quite quickly, didn't it?
Yeah, and Abramovich sanctioned over his links to Vladimir Putin, which he denies. But here we are, still in dispute, because ultimately he has to agree, because there could be legal consequence if they release the funds without his definite say-so. And at the heart of this is the fate of sanctions, the fate of the war, and also, I think we'll hear from the government in a moment, just how much money is there to be released?
Yeah, OK. Well, Rob, our political editor, Beth Rigby, has been speaking to the Foreign Secretary, Yvette Cooper, about this. Let's take a listen to their conversation.
Foreign Secretary, you say it's time for Roman Abramovich to pay up. Why now?
Well, he's had 3 years. It's 3 years since the commitment was made that the proceeds of the Chelsea sale would go into humanitarian support in Ukraine. He hasn't taken those steps, and that's why we're now issuing this licence and saying that if he doesn't now take those steps, move that money, then we will need to go to court.
But is it because you think that the war could be coming to an end? Is it to prevent him claiming ownership of the cash again if a ceasefire comes into effect? Is there a kind of a rush to do this at this point? Because it seems a bit random otherwise.
That is the result of there's been a huge amount of work and attempts and different efforts at different times to get Roman Abramovich to honour the commitment he made and to do the things that he is supposed to do as a result of the agreement that was signed at that time. That has been tried in different ways through the years, and it's still come to nothing. That's why we're doing the licence. So no, it's not linked to the timing of the work that's underway on the peace process. It's linked to the fact that we've just reached that point. We have tried every possible avenue to get him to do the right thing, and now we are taking this action with the licence.
And Foreign Secretary, you're threatening to take him to court if he doesn't surrender the funds himself. What sort of punishment would you be pushing for if he doesn't comply? What are the consequences for him?
Well, the licence runs, and we are now urging him to honour this licence, to honour the commitments that were made, and to give him a few months in which to do so. If he doesn't, we will then go to court to require that payment to be made. Because, look, this is money that is supposed to go for humanitarian support, for people in Ukraine, maybe for veterans, maybe for children who need support. This is the right thing to do.
The government's determined 2.5 billion goes to Ukraine, but recent accounts indicate Abramovich wants 1.5 billion of that to pay off loans and debts, leaving only $1 billion for Ukraine. Is that acceptable to you?
No, it's clear that there was 2.5 billion were the proceeds from the sale of the Chelsea Football Club. That was the commitment that was made as part of the agreement at that time, and that is the money that needs to go into the humanitarian support.
And can he control where the money goes? Because he actually wants it also to benefit all victims of war, and that includes Russians, it would seem. Would you be OK with that?
We've been very clear that the proceeds from the Chelsea sale, the money that is there, that needs to go into humanitarian support in Ukraine. It's the Ukrainian people who have suffered as a result of Putin's aggression, as a result of this war, and that is where this funding needs to go. And so the charitable fund that this funding money needs to go into will be covered by the terms of the licence, and that's where the money must go.
The Foreign Secretary speaking to our political editor earlier on today. Rob, Beth touched on it there. There is a dispute as to how much money is actually there from the sale of Chelsea. Roman Abramovich himself has said, you know, I've not released this because releasing it is complicated. I'm, being investigated with other legal matters. The money's been allocated elsewhere. So what's the picture?
Well, Chelsea was sold for £2.5 billion to a consortium from America, Todd Boehly and Clear Lake Capital, but we got some new detail recently when the parent company from the Abramovich era had to release its delayed accounts, and they showed that there's probably around £923 million that could be made available, because this all references the fact they're talking about the net proceeds. So should Abramovich be able to have his loans and liabilities paid off? They are about £1.5 billion. Also, there is £150 million that's set aside from the sale because Chelsea are now under investigation by the FA for alleged breaches of Football Association agent rules during the Abramovich era. Also, some money went to the lawyers as well. So there's this dispute that there probably isn't £2.5 billion. We've asked the government on it. They said we don't recognise the figures, but it's a question of how much there exactly is to be released there. Abramovich himself in 2022 said, I will not be asking for any loans to be repaid. So we're not too sure if this is still the situation.
Well, we have been in touch here at Sky News with the people we believe still to be the legal representatives of Roman Abramovich for a response to the story. Nothing as of yet. But what about the man himself? We haven't seen him for some time. Where is he? What's he doing?
No, he's been reported to be in Turkey. He participated in a book at the start of the year which talks about wanting to say farewell to Chelsea one day. At the start of the war in 2022, he was seen at peace talks, potentially positioning himself as a bit of a mediator, but since then, not heard much at all. And he's always said previously that he wants the money to go to all victims of the war in Ukraine. Could that include Russian victims? The government clearly say that it must be going to the most vulnerable in Ukraine. But I think there's a bit of leeway in this government statement today because it talks about the foundation that's being created to release the funds eventually. And it says any future gains earned by the foundation can be spent more broadly at victims of conflict worldwide. So maybe that's an ability to say, look, this main part has to go to Ukraine, but maybe you could have some say. And maybe he could be connected to the funding because it might show him to be a benevolent figure as he maybe seeks to return one day. And it's all about, in part, when does the war end is the ordeal and what happens to these sanctioned Russian oligarchs. OK,
Rob, thank you. Rob Harris there with the latest on that story. We'll have more on this development in the Roman Abramovich story later on in the programme. Another big story today, the Prime Minister calling this latest doctor strike dangerous and utterly irresponsible. This is as medics begin a 5-day walkout. Resident doctors began their industrial action this morning in a dispute over pay and accessible training routes. NHS bosses warning patient care will inevitably suffer as hospitals deal with acute winter pressure and the worst flu crisis in recent years. Our health correspondent Ashish Joshi has this next report.
It's been called a strike at the worst possible time. with flu surging through the NHS the week before Christmas. Doctors are back on the picket line. It's a fight over pay, but also the direction over the future of the health service.
Who should pay?
Patients can't see doctors.
No.
Doctors don't have jobs.
If you want a pay rise, who should pay? Which group of taxpayer?
We're also taxpayers, sir.
No, which group of taxpayers should pay for your pay rise?
I think that should be the
I don't think
responsibility
it's
of
fair
the
to
chancellor.
equivocate like a specific group. It's meant to be like a country.
Yeah, but but you're going to have to raise taxes to pay. Who should pay?
Some hospitals are warning patients they face a 15-hour wait to see a doctor in the emergency department. Paul's wife Susie was referred by their GP for an MRI scan, but still had to wait over 17 hours.
It's been a very tiring time, and we got seen by a doctor after 18 hours, and we are still now waiting for various scans, or actually to understand if they're going to do the scan yet. Generally, people are sitting there for 11, 12, 14, and as we have 17 hours. And there isn't necessarily any real information coming forward other than we're going to try and see you as quick as we can.
The Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, says the strikes have cost the NHS around £500 million so far, and these next few weeks could be the hardest yet.
It is dicey. I was at the operational centre this morning with Jim. I think we're off to a decent start, but this is going to be a challenging 5 days and a really challenging few weeks. And we're doing everything we can to keep the show on the road.
Here at the Royal Berkshire Hospital in Reading, senior consultants tell me they're already exhausted with the worst of winter potentially yet to come.
It puts immense pressure on us. We have to run a safe service, which we've done today and every round of industrial action. And so it's exhausting. I won't sugarcoat that. And so today, most of the consultants and the seniors on the shop floor, we're approaching our shift with a mix of anger and exhaustion.
This is the 14th round of strike action, but the effects continue long after the picket lines have gone.
The doctors' strikes bring huge disruption to hospitals, and that's exactly what they're supposed to do. And while there's anger from patients who've had their operations cancelled and the timing of the strikes, there is also some support for the doctors from patients who say the NHS has been failing for some time. And that's exactly what the doctors have been saying too.
Fix our jobs! Fix our pay!
Both sides can bring these strikes to an end, but there's a gulf between them, with suffering patients stuck in the middle. Ashish Joshi, Sky News in Reading.
Well, joining me now is striking doctor and Olympic rowing gold medalist Dr. Imogen Grant. Imogen, thank you so much for joining us on the programme. I understand that you don't want to be on strike today, but that you feel you have to be. Why?
You're quite right. I don't want to be on strike. I really enjoy being a doctor because it means that I get to help people. But ultimately, being a doctor is really hard work and it's a vocation. And I think that's been exploited for a number of years. I'm in my second year of foundation, and that means my next step would be specialty training. And I want to be a surgeon. Back when I started my medical degree in 2014, the competition ratio was 2 to 1, twice as many applicants for places. As of this year, it's 8.5 to 1. And all I want to do is know that I can actually get a job and train in the specialty that I want to spend my life working in the NHS in.
Yeah, Imogen, talk to me more about that, because doctors' pay gets all the headlines, but it's this crisis in jobs that doctors really want to talk about, you in particular. Talk to me about the job crisis as the doctors see it, because for you, this is the fundamental issue for a longer-term plan for the NHS.
Absolutely. And this is something that's going to affect us not just over the next few years, but in decades to come. Becoming a consultant takes a really long time, and you can only get there if you're on a training pathway. And it's fantastic that medical school places have been increased by our administrations over the last number of years. But what hasn't increased is these specialty training places. And that means that there's a massive bottleneck for people actually getting onto the next stage of medicine. And a lot of the time, if we're not able to get one of those jobs, we're literally a doctor facing unemployment. facing trying to pick up locum work, trying to find a job, rushing last minute in a really uncertain climate when there are patients sitting in A&Es, sitting in GP surgeries, waiting for operations that we could be employed doing if only there were the training posts available to us. And so far, the government has not done enough to convince the BMA and to convince us doctors that there's actually a plan to solve this shortfall.
Yeah, talk to me about the scale of this jobs crisis. And as you talk about this bottleneck of resident doctors who want to progress in their career, like you said, you want to be a surgeon, have a specialism, but there isn't the training post for you, let alone the job vacancy. Because the Health Secretary offered 1,000 more training places. That was rejected by the BMA. Emergency legislation to reduce competition for jobs would have gone from 4-1 to 2-1, according to the Health Secretary. Why is that not enough? Talk to me about the scale that you're looking at compared to what the Health Secretary thinks is the scale.
By my understanding, it's far more than 1,000 jobs per year. And from this offer, these jobs already exist. They're just what we call trust grade jobs. So doctors who are working in a hospital, but not on a specific training pathway. So it's not more doctors having jobs. It's the same doctors being upgraded to a training contract, which doesn't address the fact we've got more doctors that want more jobs. And it's all right in the short term. It's a short-term measure. But training to become a consultant takes 6, 8, 10 years. And if we're just increasing these jobs over 2 or 3 years, we're going to come up against the same bottleneck in the future, unless we have a really clear plan in place on how to increase these training posts in the first place.
Yeah, you've explained that really well in terms of, you know, as I said, the pay is the one that gets the headlines, and it's the jobs issue that perhaps doesn't cut through as well. However, public opinion has turned. We're looking at the 14th round of strike action from resident doctors. YouGov reporting just last week that 33% of the public support the strikes, 58% oppose them. What would you say to the public? Because from their point of view, the government is going on the timing of this particular strike coming at, you know, a point where the NHS is on its knees when it comes to the flu. This is the, you know, the worst flu numbers for this time of year in a number of years. And it's the government saying, look, we offered for you to take the strike action in January and you've chosen to take it now. Just looking at the optics of that, why did doctors have to strike this week? Why couldn't you have done it in January? Because the public are taking issue with that.
Yeah, and I understand it's really frustrating not being able to get the support that our patients really deserve. I want to be working right now, but I think, as the consultant said in the VT, we don't strike unless it's safe. And we have a lot of people working really hard to make sure these strikes are safe. The reason we're striking is because a deal has not been met that has actual teeth and is actually dedicating something to change. All I can say is I'm really sorry. I want things to be better, but
yeah, Imogen, I know you want to be working, but a lot of people will say, what will have been the difference between this week and a week at the end of January, say, when the flu numbers are down a little more? I mean, the Health Secretary has said that this is self-indulgent and time to cause maximum damage to the NHS. The Prime Minister said that what you're doing is dangerous and utterly irresponsible. That's the message being given by the government to the public. So, again, I'll just ask, why this week? Why not in a couple of months' time?
We've really reached the end of negotiations. There was no further budging from the government, and it seems like the only way that we're able to get a response from them in any meaningful way is strike action. And as I said, we don't strike unless it's safe. And we have consultants in the hospital who are not striking because they are not resident doctors, and they are making sure that patients are being looked after. I'm back at work next week. I'm working on Christmas Eve. I've got nights on Boxing Day. You know, every single resident doctor is going to be in that position as well. And I just ask that we have the support from the public, and I just would love to have some support from our government to understand that what we're doing is really difficult, and we'd just like to be supported to do our jobs.
Well, Imogen, I really appreciate you coming on to the programme to put across your point of view and the point of view of your fellow resident doctors that are striking from today for 5 days. That's Dr. Imogen Grant there. Really appreciate it. Thank you. Well, our health correspondent Ashish is with me in the studio now. You saw his report a few moments ago. Ashish, it's a very different narrative coming from the doctors on strike to what is being put out in the public domain by the government? They're two completely different stories.
I think the BMA, the resident doctors, took great exception to the language being used by Wes Streeting when
dangerous, self-indulgent,
and accusing them of toppling the NHS. Now, this is the narrative that the government wants to use to attack the BMA. It says that the NHS is suffering, it's struggling, record flu numbers. It's had to row back a little bit from that because talking about the flu and the super flu and the flunami and everything else, epidemiologists like Professor Jonathan Van Tam, who we all know and recognise and appreciate for the work he did during COVID, has come out to interrogate the data. He hasn't come out in support of the junior doctors, but he's looked at the data and said, well, this is another flu season and it's really bad, but it's not the worst one we've ever had. And maybe that's being overinflated. So I suspect Wes Streeting has looked at what Dr. Van Tam and other very senior NHS leaders have said about the flu season and rode back from that. I have it from my own sources within NHS England that they have been told that the communication should now be about patient safety, about making sure that the hospital is open and trying to meet its elective lists and everything else.
But
and not
Dr. Imogen saying resident doctors would not go and strike unless they believed it to be safe.
Because they put mechanisms in place to make sure that they have enough doctors to look after the patients there, and striking doctors can be called into work if there are situations. And that's between negotiations between the BMA and the Trust. But essentially, the communication and the language has changed a little bit because you'll have Trust leaders now not talking about resident doctors holding the NHS to ransom, going out on strike when we need them most, but now it's about the NHS. I wonder, Sarah-Jane, if the Health Secretary, when he used that language, I was thinking about it at the time because I just interviewed the Health Secretary, I just interviewed the BMA, and the BMA had put an offer out to its members and said, you've got the next few days to vote. And then we had the Health Secretary with an editorial in the Times and going out and speaking about junior doctors, damaging the NHS, putting patients at risk, toppling the health service. And I thought, OK, they haven't voted yet, but surely you don't want to go on the attack. And that maybe the Health Secretary knew something I don't, but maybe there was a reasoning behind his language. But I certainly feel that backfired slightly. But we heard Dr. Grant. Training places is a big issue. Jobs not being available for UK-trained medics when they come out of university.
This is the 14th round of strike action. When does it end, Ashish? Because there doesn't seem to be any end in sight.
They are both deeply, deeply entrenched. There is no love lost between the two sides. There were rumours today that ACAS, right, the arbitration service, were going to be involved. Both sides said, no, absolutely not having it. Not having any arbitration from ACAS. We don't want reconciliation through a third party. We want to resolve this. They want money in training places. There's no money available. And Wes Streeting said he's tried the training places route. So this is going to drag on for a while. I can't see an early resolution. At least the next 5 days will go through. And then they will negotiate all the time. There are negotiations taking place on a daily basis. And there needs to be a breakthrough because ultimately what's happening is it's damaging for the doctors, damaging for the NHS, and most of all, it's damaging for the patients.
OK. Ashish, thank you. Ashish Joshi there, our health correspondent. Still to come on the UK tonight, we'll have the latest as 2 people are arrested in central London, hours after police warned that they would detain anyone chanting Infectada slogans. Also ahead, the King meets survivors of the Huntingdon train attack at Buckingham Palace. Plus, why problems remain for Britain's last chemical plant, despite a government bailout of more than £100 million.
the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is.
First off, just the scale of what we're looking at.
Our data shows it's been happening. Question is why it hasn't been stopped.
2 people have been arrested in central London this evening for shouting what police describe as slogans involving calls for intifada. It comes just hours after the chief constables of the Met and Greater Manchester Police announced that anyone chanting "globalise the intifada" would be arrested because the context has changed following the Bondi Beach terror attack. Molly Malone joins me now from Westminster with more details. Molly.
Well, as you say, SJ, the context here is important because these arrests do come hours after 2 of the country's biggest police forces, the Metropolitan Police and Greater Manchester Police, made warnings essentially saying that they were going to change their approach, that they were going to be bringing in new measures to, in their words, deter intimidation, saying that anyone chanting slogans like "globalise the intifada" would face arrest. And we've seen 2 arrests tonight at a central London pro-Palestine protest. And they said that's because the context has changed following the Bondi Beach terror attack, which in Australia, which saw 15 people killed, an attack, of course, which targeted the Jewish community who'd been celebrating the first night of Hanukkah. So the Met have said that 3 people have been arrested in total at this protest, 2 people who shouted slogans arrested for racially aggravated public order offences, and a 3rd person for obstructing those arrests. Now, in terms of the response to this change of approach by these 2 big police forces, they've been welcomed largely by Jewish groups. The chief rabbi has said that such chants are, in his words, unlawful, but have faced criticism from elsewhere, with Ben Jamal from the Palestine Solidarity Campaign saying that it restricts the right to protest. But what it certainly does mark, as I say, is a change in approach after both the Bondi Beach terror attack, but also the attack at Heaton Park Synagogue in Manchester a couple of months ago now. Again, a target on the Jewish community at a synagogue during Yom Kippur. 2 people were killed, and authorities saying that they really want these changes, this change in approach, making this arrest to show that words have meaning and have consequences.
Molly, thank you. Molly Malone with the latest on those protest arrests. Now, the King met survivors of the Huntingdon train attack at a reception in Buckingham Palace this evening. Charles speaking to the train guard, Samir Zatouni, who was hailed a hero for stepping in to protect passengers on the Doncaster to London service. He also met the train driver, Andrew Johnson. Still to come on the UK Tonight. We'll discuss the future of the Rolling Stones amid reports that the band have scrapped plans for a UK and European tour. Let's return to our top story this evening. The government's demand for Roman Abramovich to release £2.5 billion to be donated to victims of the war in Ukraine. The funds were supposed to be released when he sold the club back in 2022, following Russia's invasion. Well, joining me now, Sir Bill Browder, a human rights and anti-corruption activist who began a global justice campaign after the imprisonment and death of his lawyer in Russia. Sir Bill, thank you so much for joining us on the UK Tonight to react to this story. You may be hard-pressed to find anyone who disagrees with this from the UK government, but our political editor, putting it to the Foreign Secretary, says, it seems a bit random. Why now?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that is the issue, which is, this has been going on, the war has been going on for 4 years. That money has been available for 3 years. It would seem to me that the government should have been demanding this 3 years ago. I mean, there's victims who are suffering dramatically in Ukraine. They need the money. The Russia has caused all this trouble. Abramovich has agreed that this money should be given to Ukraine. Why is it all of a sudden they're demanding it now and not a long time ago?
What's behind the delay? Roman Abramovich has previously said, look, it's a complicated picture. The 2.5 billion, it might not be that amount. And it's not just sitting there. It's subject to all sorts of legal contests and things like that. So what's the complicated picture going on behind the scenes?
Well, I mean, I don't know the details behind the scenes, but I would speculate that Roman Abramovich doesn't want to give that money up. I think that if he's like other oligarchs out there, he's probably holding on, complicating matters, trying to figure out a way that the money stays frozen until some kind of settlement has happened in Ukraine, sanctions are lifted, and he can get the money back. I think he doesn't want to part with that money, and I would imagine that the best way of not parting with it is not giving the money away, and so that's probably his strategy.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, actually, because you hear about assets being frozen and you hear about sanctions. What actually happens to that money in the meantime, and also once sanctions are lifted and assets unfrozen?
Well, I mean, I think that the bet of all the Russian oligarchs is to hold out, hold on, pray that Trump lifts the sanctions, which he's promised to do. There's all sorts of warm words between the United States and Russia right now, and if the sanctions get lifted, then all these guys get their money back, and that's what they're all licking their lips and salivating and wanting their billions back, while the Ukrainians are suffering, while their country has been destroyed, while people have been their houses blown up, and so on and so forth. I think that's what's going on, and the only question is, it's the right decision by the government to demand this money. It's the right decision to threaten to take Abramovich to court if it doesn't get transferred, but the only question is, why did they wait so long? They could have done this a long time ago, and why are according to them, they're giving him 90 days? Why give him 90 days if they're really serious about the money? Go for it right now.
There are calls, and there have been a growing number of calls for frozen Russian assets to be donated to Ukraine. It's seen as something that would tip the balance of this war. How doable is that? And sort of what kind of money are we talking about here? How could that possibly happen?
Well, when the war started, Russia had $300 billion of the government's central bank reserves in Western central banks. And a week after the war started, that money was frozen, and it has remained frozen until now. The vast majority of that money is held in the European Union, most of it in Brussels and at Euroclear in Brussels. And there's a huge meeting tomorrow at the European Union about just this topic, about whether to take that money, put it aside, and then use a complicated scheme to effectively lend that money back to Ukraine so they could defend themselves. And then when the war is over, have that money that's been put aside to settle that loan. And of course, Vladimir Putin's very much against it. He's made death threats to the head of Euroclear, the place that holds the money. There's rumors or articles this evening that other Belgian officials have been threatened as well. The Russians, they don't count their dead, but they count their money. And there's a lot of money there, and that money would actually tip the balance in favor of Ukraine if it was handed over.
Yeah, such a big and important decision. As you said, you know, the timing of this is all very interesting with that big meeting tomorrow. Would EU leaders be brave enough to make that decision? I mean, you talk about some of the consequences there in terms of Vladimir Putin's reaction, but it really could be the tipping point in this war. But can you see them actually making that big decision?
Well, so what are the consequences of them not making the decision? The consequences are that the U.S. has cut off Ukraine from military aid. Ukraine doesn't have the money to continue to defend themselves. The front lines would collapse. Russia would succeed in Ukraine. Russia would then get all the equipment that we've provided Ukraine. And then there would be a front line at Poland, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania in which European soldiers and potentially British soldiers would be dying fighting with Russia. So if the Europeans are not brave enough to take the money, then I guess they'll be have to be brave enough for young European men and women to be dying on the front line with Russia in the not too distant future. That's what we're talking about. That's the trade-off if they don't take that money. And so I do think that the Chancellor of Germany and a few other big leaders in the EU understand this. And the question is the EU functional enough to make the right decision so we don't end up in that mess?
Great insight, as always. Good to talk, Bill. So Bill Browder there, thank you for your time this evening. Always appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you. Now, the country's biggest chemical plant will remain open following a government bailout worth more than £120 million. The deal will protect around 500 jobs at INEOS's Grangemouth plant, but this critical piece of national infrastructure is still beset by problems, as our economics editor Ed Conway explains.
An 11th hour rescue for one of Britain's most important industrial sites. 500 jobs safeguarded as the government puts £120 million of taxpayer money into Grangemouth. The alternative? Certain closure, says the business secretary.
What would have happened, do you think, if you hadn't have stepped in?
If we hadn't have stepped in, there's no question that this plant would have been gone.
Really?
Yeah. There's no question that this plant probably, the notice probably would have gone out before Christmas.
It was that close?
That imminent, yeah. It was that imminent.
And that's a big deal because what they make here is an essential building block for the modern world.
Ethylene is one of those base chemicals. There's precursors that goes into all sorts of things. I mean, plastics most obviously, but also things like polyester and a whole kind of constellation of different products. And in order to make it, what you have to do is you basically have to heat up really high temperatures. You have to heat up ethane, which comes in, sometimes gas, sometimes oil, which comes through these furnaces, and then cracks it, literally kind of cracks it and turns it into this other chemical, ethylene, which then goes into pipelines which go around the country. This is the last one standing.
But alongside the economics, there's the politics. Not for nothing did 3 secretaries of state travel to Grangemouth today. They want people to know they are here to save jobs.
This is a significant investment by the UK government today, over £120 million to secure, of course, the 500 jobs here at the ethanol cracker at Grangemouth, but more than that, the jobs in the supply chain as well, and not just for this year, but for many years to come.
The challenge for them is that it's hard not to see today's funding, like the money provided to British Steel and Jaguar Land Rover earlier in the year, as a sort of stopgap, because, well, that's kind of what it is.
The real reason this is happening, I think you can boil it all down to, is the fact that right now, the price at which INEOS can sell its ethylene in Europe is actually lower than what it costs them to make it. So even though this money is going to help, certainly for a few years, it's quite hard to see how it deals with something quite deep-seated facing the European chemicals industry.
In other words, this is unlikely to be the last you'll hear about Britain's struggling chemicals sector.
In short term, is this how do we get through next year? And in long term, is the real difficult how do you tackle energy costs? Because that is structurally a European issue. The fact that Europe is deindustrialising because of carbon tax while the rest of the world doesn't have it is a big thing.
And that hasn't been resolved?
That hasn't been resolved.
Still, perhaps what matters most for the people here in Grangemouth is that days before Christmas there is, finally, some good news. Jobs saved in the nick of time. All those questions will have to wait until next year. Ed Conway, Sky News in Grangemouth.
The Rolling Stones have reportedly scrapped plans for a tour of the UK and Europe next summer. The decision coming after Stones guitarist Keith Richards reportedly told his bandmates he was unable to commit to a schedule of stadium gigs over the course of 4 months. Keith, who turns 82 tomorrow, has previously spoken about arthritis affecting his hands, forcing him to change the way he plays. Well, joining me now, Rolling Stones biographer and music journalist Philip Norman. Philip, good evening to you. What do you think is going on here, then?
Well, it may come as a surprise because Keith has actually looked like a walking zombie for about the last 20 years. But apparently it's too much. It's in the fingers. This is an occupational hazard of all lead guitarists. They just cannot make the chords. And so he said he can't commit to it. But I don't think I can remember Keith ever committing to anything at all in any era. So that sounds a bit unfamiliar. So maybe he will revive a little at the thought of all those dollars later on, possibly.
But this is a tour that's been heavily promoted for quite a while now. So if this is the case, it's a big decision, isn't it?
Yes, it is a big decision because people still amazingly flock in their hundreds of thousands to see these crumbly men who still kind of represent daring, and they seem like rebels and outlaws instead of just rather sort of wavery billionaires.
I mean, Philip, you're not sounding like much of a fan to me.
If you've been on tour with them like I have, and also read the biography of Mick Jagger, you might be a little bit sad as well.
You've probably had enough of them. They've been touring for so long. And that's the thing, isn't it? Whenever I talk to people about the Rolling Stones, it's almost like a bucket list item. You've got to see the Stones once in your life on tour. People don't say that anymore because they have been touring for so long. Why have they continued to trot around the globe?
This is amazing if you remember that Mick Jagger in the 60s used to be asked what he thought he would be doing at the age of 30. Also that this, in the 60s, was the most unstable of all the bands around. 2 of them went to jail. 1 of them drowned in a swimming pool. They all ended up broke because of a terrible manager and had to go to live abroad. And yet, what happened really was that they decided not to have a manager again, but let Mick manage them. And Mick is a terrifically good businessman and a terrifically good entrepreneur. And Mick is the one who runs the show, really.
Yeah, I guess there's a sense now of, like you said, their checkered history and nobody thinking they would last this long, outlasting so many bands in terms of touring. They've got to turn up and buy a ticket to see it, to believe it. But in terms of Mick Jagger being a good businessman, that's a good point, actually, because bands, particularly now, only really make money by touring, by doing stadium gigs.
That's true. It used to be quite different. They made money on albums and then they toured to support the album. And Mick understands all the, he was at the London School of Economics. He used to be called Mike Jagger and wear knitted driving gloves and little cardigans, And then somebody called Andrew Oldham, who was a genius, in fact, realised that the Beatles were getting a little bit safe, and the Beatles' mums and grandmas were starting to like the Beatles. And so he said to Mick, if you pretend to be wicked, you'll make money. And Mick said, oh, OK. And that's what happened. He's still sort of playing an image that was given him by this 19-year-old teenage tycoon in the early 60s.
Smart man, smart man. Given that this tour was next summer and given the reasons we think that are behind it, do you think this might be the last we've seen of the Rolling Stones on tour? Do you think the tour juggernaut is going to come to a grinding halt?
No, I think they'll be, cryogenically frozen and still come out playing Satisfaction, in sometime in the future.
You know what? ABBA's got that hologram show in central London. I wonder if Mick Jagger's sort of eyeing that up and thinking, do you know what? Could earn money by sitting at home and sending out holograms.
Well, Mick is the only one who is really the marvel, the human marvel in this, because, all the time people thought he was backstage having sex and drugs. He was doing press-ups. His dad was a gym teacher, and he always was very, very sporty and not at all the decadent creature that he appeared to be. And so, even as Mick is out there alone with many holograms, he'll still be out there, I'm sure, because applause and adulation is the strongest drug there are. The strongest drugs there are.
Oh, well, listen, Philip Norman, thank you so much. Really lifting up the velvet rope giving us an insight into the Rolling Stones and what's going on right now. Their tour for next summer in the UK and Europe, as far as we know, being cancelled. Really good to talk to you, Philip. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Still to come on the programme, how technology let England down at a crucial point in the third Ashes test. Action from Adelaide on the way.
We've come to one of Moscow's Cold War bunkers. It was built as a top-secret command centre.
Being here really feels like you're stepping back in time. I'm Ivor Bennett, Sky's Moscow correspondent.
A show of military might and menace.
Courage, bravery and sacrifice will win the day.
It's a new subject. They'll learn about combat drones and some how to handle a Kalashnikov.
The Kremlin continues to put forward its own version of events, both present and past.
There's no mention of the fact that Russia invaded its neighbour. That's rewriting history, isn't it?
Now we have to read it carefully.
Vladimir Putin put forward his plan for a ceasefire in Ukraine, telling Kiev, pull out of your eastern territories and the war will end. Why should the West trust you?
Frankly, I don't care whether the West trusts us or not.
Vladimir Putin is already the Kremlin's longest-serving leader since Stalin. The question is, what will a fifth Putin term mean for Russia and the world?
Why do you support Vladimir Putin, Mr. Segal?
I can't answer questions that stupid.
I've watched Vladimir Putin attempt to create a new world order.
The St. Petersburg Economic Forum was the backdrop to Vladimir Putin's latest verbal volley that Russia could send missiles to other nations to target the West.
Ambassador, I wonder, shall we have a quick word for Sky News?
Is the West right? Are you fueling Russia's war machine?
British media, oh my God, you're not afraid of being here.
American journalist Evan Gershkovich is on trial here, but was first on display.
Russia says Evan Gershkovich was caught red-handed, but has never produced any evidence to back that up. Sky News, get the full story first.
I'll tell you on another day on the podcast what that was all about.
Welcome to the world.
Come along for the journey, it'll be fun.
Russia knows our weaknesses, but do you? This is the war game.
There were a number of armed security.
We want to discover, to find out what's really going on.
Everything you need to know about British politics in about 20 minutes.
I actually don't like political drama.
So, where next?
Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Now, the third Ashes test is underway and it is a must-win for England. The tourists starting well, but there was significant controversy on day one, with the provider of the Snicko technology admitting to a significant mistake that benefited the hosts, Australia. Let's get the details. Jess is here. And Jess, things look to have been going pretty well for England until that controversial moment.
Yeah, and this is the moment everyone's talking about because it did start well for England. They got 2 early wickets and you thought they were going to push on because, like you said, this is a must-win test in Adelaide. They got to about midway through the day and what happened was Alex Carey, he was on 72. England thought that there was contact between bat and ball. This is what Snicko's there for.
Yeah.
Snicko is a system, a technology system, determined to whether the ball edged the bat. Essentially, was there contact? Initially, he wasn't given out. England said, I think there was contact, so they reviewed it. It went upstairs to the review system, as it normally does. But the Snicko operator used the wrong microphone to determine whether there was contact made, therefore made the wrong decision, and Carey stayed. So he was on 72 runs at that point. He went on to make a century, which was a vital century for Australia at that point. So everyone's talking about that and the controversy. But as I did say, it did start pretty well for England. Let me show you how the day came about, because England came into the match with the captain, Ben Stokes, of course, urging his players to show a bit of dog to fight back in this final 3 tests. They started well, as I said, Zach Crawley with a fine catch there to dismiss Travis Head. After lunch, Jofra Archer got Marnus Labuschagne with the first ball of the session before removing Cameron Green for naught 2 balls later. Australia now then, 94 for 4. Australia's standing captain, Steve Smith, withdrew in the morning suffering from nausea and dizziness, and his batting replacement, Usman Khawaja, was dropped on 5 before going on to make 82. Josh Tongue with the catch off Will Jacks. Then came the moment that has got everybody talking. Australia were 4 wickets down at this stage. England thought they had dismissed Alex Carey, who was on 72. Technology showed a slight murmur there, as you can see on the screen, but Carey was given not out. The Snicko operators apologised afterwards as their error led to Carey's reprieve. And as I said, he went on to make a century. And inevitably, Carey, the wicket-keeper batter, went on to score 106 runs, his 3rd Test match century. Carey's wife in tears as he looked up to the sky in memory of his dad, who passed away just 3 months ago.
Yeah, if I was given out, I think I would have reviewed it. Probably not confidently, though. It was a nice sound as it passed the bat, yeah.
If you thought it was about that carpenter, why did he manage to get away with it?
Well, Snicko obviously didn't line up, did it? Yeah, it's just the way cricket goes sometimes, isn't it? You have a bit of luck, and maybe it went my way today.
Well, BBG Sports, that's the company that owns Snicko, they said, given that Alex Carey admitted he had hit the ball in question, the only conclusion that can be drawn from this is that the Snicko operator at the time must have selected the incorrect stump mic for audio processing. In light of this, BBG Sports takes full responsibility for the error.
I mean, we're used to debating VAR, aren't we, when it comes to tech in sport? You don't really hear about Snicko. It's been used for, well, as long as I can remember, without this kind of controversy. So it seems like a really unfortunate human error. Costly for England, though, at a time when they need the breaks. They don't need those breaks to be going against them like that.
No, that was a pivotal moment, you're right. And these kind of discrepancies are few and far between. Mm-hmm. And it depends from country to country, you see. So Australia used Snicko. In England, we use something called Ultra Edge, which is essentially the same thing, but, you know, similar but different reams of technology. But, yeah, a major talking point in that. Absolutely incredible. It's interesting, isn't it, that BBG Sports admit that they made the error.
Yeah.
England won't care about that, though. They go into day 2 in a decent-ish position, hoping to bowl out Australia.
They have to let that one go, aren't they? It's been
let it go, breathe. We go again, SJ, I think the term is.
Onwards and hopefully upwards.
Hopefully onwards for the cricket team. So you're up to date then on the 3rd Test in Adelaide. Much more to come in the football tonight. Let's get straight to it.
Staying connected is vital for business. Sky Business sponsors this report.
It strikes me that it's changed an awful lot even in the last 10 or 15 years. It wasn't very long ago we had yourself, we had Sam Allardyce, Alan Pardew, Steve McLaren, Steve Bruce, Harry Redknapp, all of you competing amongst each other in the top division. And that was a decade and a half ago. It wasn't that long ago.
No.
So that seemed a heck of a change so quickly, doesn't it?
Well, you're talking about people pretty much the same sort of age as well, of course. You know, maybe that was a generation, wasn't it, you're talking of? You know, we were probably at quite an important part of our careers in that period, and after, with quite a long CV and a lot of clubs behind that we could refer to, which would suggest we can do this job. I mean, now, of course, you know, the focus is often on the younger coach, you know, and there's nothing wrong with that either. It's a young person's game, so I don't complain about that at all. But as a result, of course, when they're looking for a younger coach, these clubs, often they probably think they're going to find him abroad. The Premier League is becoming a force to itself. I mean, the amount of money, it reminds me of Italy when I was there.
Sky Business sponsors this report.
Right, we are going to have a look at the weather now. I will bring that to you. Let me have a look. It's going to be fairly mild and unsettled into this coming weekend with heavy rain and strong winds at times. But Christmas week is looking drier, calmer and colder. There you go, I found it. It was short and sweet, but some good news for next week for Christmas. That's all we care about, isn't it? Right, that's it from us. We'll be back tomorrow night